Again, welcome to Now Tell Us. Hello. Let me see, because I think we have a connection problem. Let me just be sure that everything is well as we are shown to be live, but there's a message that comes and says it's not on. Oh, no, we are on. So, hey, welcome to Now Tell Us. This is your host, Anthony Moirore, and we get to have someone come and give us a story, come and educate us on an issue that is of concern to the society. And I don't know where you're from, but all over the world, we've been having issues with the justice system. And our guest today is going to tell us how to fix our broken criminal justice system. So at this moment, I'm going to welcome to the show our guest who is known as Edward Cronin. Welcome to the show, Ed.
Thank you so much, Anthony. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, it's an honor to have you here with us, and we really appreciate you taking out your time to come and tell us how to fix our criminal justice system. It's a big issue all over the world. I know in America it could be a bigger issue than some of the other parts of the world, but it is an issue.
Yeah, it's a very big issue. I wish I could fix the system,
Mm-hmm.
but after being in the system for over 30 years, I've found out and come to the conclusion that the system, at least in the United States, the results are a big failure.
Mm.
And, we spend trillions of dollars on this issue, from corrections to policing to courts to all different areas of law enforcement. And when we look at the results of what we have in a country that prides itself on democracy and freedom of speech and opportunity, we lock up more people than any other country in the world.
Mm.
I don't have the statistics in front of me, but I believe China has 1.6 billion, and
Mm-hmm.
they don't lock up half the amount of people that we do in a population of 330 million. And
Mm.
what makes it even worse is the disproportionate amount of people of color
Mm-hmm.
who are incarcerated and arrested um, in a system that has become self-fulfilling in terms of its results. And we talk about police reform all the time, and we talk about trying to go back and fix the system.
Mm-hmm.
But I think we need to step back really and look at the history of why we are doing what we are doing today before we can move forward.
Yeah, sure. And even before we go there, we would like to know who is Edward Cronin and what connection has he got to with the justice system?
Okay, thank you, Anthony. I've been in law enforcement for over 30 years. I was a police chief in two cities in Massachusetts, in the United States. But I had a very fun career, actually, working internationally. And I worked in various places. I was in Egypt for 1 year. I was also in Russia, Ukraine, Georgia. And then my last 3 years, I worked for the United States State Department as a senior law enforcement advisor working on police reform in Moldova, which is a country that's obviously in the news right now.
Mm-hmm.
So I've also got a master's degree in criminal justice management, an advanced graduate degree in organizational development and systems thinking. And I've also attended Oxford University and worked with the Thames Valley Police.
Mm. Wonderful.
Thank you.
And it shows that you have quite an experience with the system. So we are listening to the right person who can give us an idea of how you say that you can't fix it. Maybe we can't fix it, but what part can we play in it and see that we get it improved or maybe go heading in the right direction? So you talked before of going back to the origins. Now take us there.
Well, if anyone honestly looks at the origin of Black people in this country, it goes back to the days of slavery.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not going to tell the long story. I think there is so many good books out there today that are telling the real story of where America came from. There's one great book I would recommend. It's called Race and Reunion. It's by
Mm-hmm.
David Blight, and it's the history of America in the area of civil rights and freedom for Black people after the Civil War. And it documents very carefully and intelligently why equal rights have never been given to Black people in the United States. And
Mm-hmm.
that is part of what even is going on today. Um, so the police, unfortunately, are a reflection of society, okay? And even before the Civil War in the 1800s, the police were the enforcers of the slave laws, including not only capturing slaves when they escaped in the South, but even in the free states, having to return slaves to the South. And this was even um, ratified by the United States Supreme Court
Mm-hmm.
in Plessy versus Ferguson, where a man who had escaped and gotten to the North was told he was property and he had to go back.
Mm.
So we've gone through all these things. We went through emancipation, and then immediately we went into Reconstruction and the rise of white power to suppress Black people again. And it
Mm-hmm.
goes all the way through the 1900s. It goes all the way through Brown versus the Board of Education when we had segregation, and when finally in different schools, and also in political areas that today, we have people that are still leaning on this idea of states' rights
Mm-hmm.
and talking again about what states can do rather than following the Constitution, where we should be trying to give free rights to everybody,
Mm-hmm.
uh, untethered.
Okay. Now, what now we see, and thank you for taking us back there and to try and see where the problem originates from. And the conditions could be different from the way they were back then. And through your experience in the 30 years and over that you have been in the system, what would you say is the greatest cause of crime? That is, I mean, now since things are not, the Black community is not in slavery again, they've got the freedom in quotes, and still crime goes on.
Yeah, I think it's obviously the disparities in the economic opportunities that are not equal in our
Mm-hmm.
country. And in the 1960s, President Johnson had a study done about why crime was occurring, was going up, why there were so many issues around issues of civil rights, so much anger at police, so much disparity in terms of economic opportunity. And he had this commission put together. I think it was the Kerner Commission is the name of it. And they came up, and they were not a very liberal type of group, but they came up with their answers and they gave them to President Johnson. And they said the root of the cause of the problem is systemic racism. And it is said that Johnson flew into a rage and
Mm-hmm.
said he was not going to talk about that and he didn't want that to happen. So instead, he began his campaign on war on crime and trying to lift people out of poverty by all types of new housing and all this other situation. But all he did was codify it and put people in another place, but never actually did legislation that actually helped people to rise up. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, I can tell you a little story if you like about how systemic racism worked in a situation I had in my career.
Okay.
All right. I was a police chief in a city in Massachusetts. It was about 40,000 people.
Mm-hmm.
And I took over. We had a very, very violent situation in this city when I came in. Matter of fact, the murder rate in the uh, city was a higher per ratio than the city of Boston, our capital city.
Mm-hmm.
And we also had a dropout rate for kids in school of color that was over 40%, primarily Latino. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And most of the murders and the crime were occurring in those communities also. And I
Okay.
was hired to have a war on crime and make sure that these people are taken care of. Okay. So I
Mm-hmm.
came as a police chief and knowing the city and the community, I, of course, went into enforcement practices. I organized drug task force. We did all types of increase in enforcement. We had when I came on the department, the department had done 26 drug search warrants. Within 2 years, we were doing 150 a year,
Mm-hmm.
and all the other type of enforcement levels were similar. And after we did this for 2 years, what we came out with was no significant difference. All right. So it wasn't until a Latino woman came to me, a person by the name of Syra Pinto, brilliant woman. And she
Mm-hmm.
came to me and met with me and was putting together a task force to improve the students' standing, the Latino students' standing in the public schools. And it was then when she pointed out to me the failure rate. And I realized right at the time that these are all the kids that end up going into crime and into gangs and all this other stuff. So I began to understand that, the roots of this weren't really a police problem, but the police were part of the system. So we began to have conversations. And I said to her in our initial conversation, where are all the fathers here that I want to reach out and talk to people and no one wants to talk to me? And she said, well, don't you hold all the power? You have all the guns. You have
Mm-hmm.
all the manpower. You have all the money. You have all the cars. And that hit me in the face. Like I had a tremendous amount of power. But I didn't know how to use it. So I ended up starting to reflect and thinking about what she was saying. And then she invited me into groups with mothers. And they would sit with me and they would tell me about the racist experiences that their children had in school. They would tell me that some of my police officers were racist, and they would tell me examples. And I never, ever said no. I
Mm-hmm.
never, ever disagreed. I listened. And after a period of time, we began to understand. I began to understand what they were feeling. And the beautiful thing that happened was that Syra and I were both what's called systems thinkers. And that could be a whole nother show, but it's a process that is used in business to find out the root causes of problems.
Mm-hmm.
So we got 40 representatives from the community, including the minority community for the first time, to sit and find out why crime was occurring in our city. And we brought in special trainers and we trained for 3 days. And we had roundtables and breakouts and everything else. And we had people like the Chamber of Commerce, we had 2 college presidents, we had the newspaper, we had all the representatives of the community, law enforcement, social work, everything. And the task force came out with 2 reasons why crime was occurring in our city. One, systemic racism.
Mm-hmm.
Lack of economic opportunity for at-risk youth. And right away, 2 or 3 people of white leadership and power stood up and said, we are not going to talk about racism. And I stood up as the chief of police, a white man, using my white privilege and my power. And I said, yes, we are. So we began to have discussions. It didn't happen overnight, but we did. But one of the things we did immediately was I was confiscating thousands and thousands of dollars from drug raids, drug.
Mm-hmm.
I turned around and I took a good amount of that money and convinced other agencies to put it in a kitty, and we created jobs for at-risk kids that summer and teaching them leadership skills. And right away after the summer, the crime began to drop. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'll jump ahead today. It wasn't just what I did, but it's what we initiated, and people began to take that. 2 years, we had a woman of color who was our mayor. We had people running for city council that were people of color and getting elected. Today, the city of Fitchburg last year had one murder. Not good, but
Wow.
tremendous improvement. And the dropout rate for the kids of color is below 8%. All right.
Mm.
So, what I'm trying to say is I held the power. And it wasn't until I understood that and listened to what people were going through that I understood it. And then I
Mm-hmm.
began to see it. I had a situation in my police department one day where a man came in and couldn't speak English. And he waited for like 20 minutes. And I had my door open. I was chief, and I said, "This isn't right." So then finally he left. And then I talked to one of my deputies and I said, "Look, so and so, the woman out front, is going to retire soon. Okay. We're going to get someone that speaks languages. Okay. We're going to get them in here,
Mm-hmm.
Spanish, hopefully." And he said to me, "Well, I hope they're qualified." And I said, "What?" And, you know, right away, I understood after listening to people that what he was saying was those people are not qualified. So you better be very careful who you get.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what? I told that story to maybe 10 or 15 police chiefs, and they all said the same thing. What's wrong with that question? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So a big issue. And my experience has been you can't fix it with policies. You
Yeah.
have you have to have a change of heart, and
Mm.
you have to open your heart and to listen to
Mm-hmm.
people.
Wonderful. And it's good to hear it from you, who's been inside there, because mostly we get it from the news and we see it on the internet. And sometimes we may be tempted, and especially people who are not close to the happenings, we may be tempted to think that these are stories made up. But then when we are hearing it from someone who's been there and
Yes.
experiencing it from the other side, now we get a very clear picture of it and what actually happens. And it's
Right.
good that you do confess that, yeah, there are people who are not willing to listen to any other kind of person, no other race. I mean,
Right.
and they are the superior. So
Right.
it's good. It's good that you stood your ground, and it's good that you moved with the heart of the people and welcomed suggestions and worked with the community. And now, the big question I would ask myself, and maybe those people who are going to listen to this, is how can we get it to the law enforcers? I mean, some of us don't even come closer to them. I mean, they have the power; they can do anything. So,
Hmm.
how do I pass that message to them? That they,
That's
yeah.
that's a very difficult thing to do. Okay. But one of the things that I think this is worth listening to, back before 2001, before 9/11, there was in the 90s what we would call in policing a renaissance. Okay. And there was this opening of what was called community policing. All right.
Mhm.
And there was funding from the federal government that was encouraging community policing. And there were very competitive grants that were given out. And police departments were challenged to come up with ideas on how they could work with their communities. And I
Mhm.
remember going to conferences with taking people from my community, civilians, and going to these conferences and discussing ideas of how we could do things better. And we did. We did very well. And there was a lot of good changes that happened. And then 9/11 came. And then all the money that was put aside for that type of work was put into terrorism, homeland security. And then we go around and we have two wars. Okay. And unfortunately, many times in the last 20 years, a lot of the officers that we're getting are coming from the war. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
being a veteran and defending the United States of America is a very honorable thing. But that doesn't translate necessarily into a good police officer. They are a different set of skills. And I think that we've had a militarization of policing in the last 20 years. And if you look on TV today, whenever you see an incident, you'll see tanks and armored cars and police and combat gear. I mean, they used to wear black. Now they're wearing military uniforms, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And what does this say to people? I mean, when you say, how do you go about doing it? Well, how do you approach that? Okay. So I think what has to happen is that our government needs to understand this, and the Justice Department needs to start putting out opportunities for police to make transitions back to being community police. You know, I think that, you know, I have another story I could tell you about what happened in my community if you want,
Yeah.
where
Tell us. Tell us.
we had a
That's why
situation.
you're here.
Okay. After we had done a lot of the work in my community and things were good, and I had very good relationships with the leadership and constantly spending hundreds of hours out of my office listening and talking and doing things with them. You know, we even, you know, would bring kids to go see the Celtics game, kids that would never even have an opportunity in a million years, okay, because they come from poverty, and we took them, okay, not because, you know, it was just, these were things that we did with, we did a lot of things with these kids when they weren't in trouble, to try to create this trust with them. So anyway, things went very well. And then one day I got a call when I was sleeping at night. And unfortunately, the state police, not my police, but the state police had chased a car into my city.
Mm-hmm.
It was a young black man was driving the car. He was 19 years old. And he radioed to my cars, and one of my cars pulled onto a street and blocked that car, and it stopped, and the state police got behind that car. So when everything had stopped, the kid driving the car panicked and tried to drive ahead around or towards my police officer, and the state trooper shot him in the back of the head and killed him.
Mm.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the next morning I went to work. Okay. This is the type of thing that cities burn down from. And the phone rang as soon as I walked in my office. And it was an African-American minister who I was very, very close friendships with and worked with. And he said to me, he didn't say, hello, chief. He said, what happened? And I said, look, I'm going to tell you everything I know. All right. There's not going to be any of this. I can't say this. I can't say that because of the district attorney and all that baloney. I told him exactly what happened. I told him the story like I just told you, you know. The kid was 19 years old. He drove the car. He panicked. He went towards my car. And the officer who was driving my car was a black individual also. And he had said to me, Chief, if he didn't shoot him, I would have had to shoot him. Right? He was scared.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not justifying whether it was a shooting or not, whether it was fair or anything else. Okay. Matter of fact, there was a civil suit afterwards 2 years later, and money was given to the family. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But there was no indictment on the case. But one of the things that this minister said to me, his name was Tom, Chief, if you said it, I believe it. So what happened was the next 2 days, there was all kinds of media attention. There were protests. There was a protest walk up Main Street. There were speeches that were given, and there was no violence.
Mm-hmm.
and Adrian Ford, the leader of the Black community, came out and said the police were transparent and honest. So all I'm trying to say is getting faith and confidence and trust in people doesn't happen overnight.
Yeah.
And it takes hundreds of hours of work to do this. And I really feel that policing lost that in the last 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
You have to have that reservoir of strength, conviction, to know whether or not you're going to be trusted. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I was dearly thankful to all my community for the way they responded to this incident. And, I think what we did was a model that could be replicated in a lot of other places.
That's good. And this is why we have you here telling us this. And this could get to people out there that could implement whatever it is that they are getting from this episode. Now, it's the big things start from small things like just this discussion. I mean, every big tree in the forest started from a small seed. And dealing with the criminal justice system, and also going over into the bigger, nation against nation. I have a personal comment that I want to make because this could be one of the issues that affects the people down there. From up the big people in the government, maybe they are not passing this. They are not passing this message that you are now trying to pass. Because they would not want to appear as failures, so they are there, they have the power, and they are controlling everything. Now,
You're right on.
yeah, my personal sentiment is this. And one, just I'll pick one item that I always see, and I say, what's this trying to imply? Every national holiday, we have a president and prime ministers. I'm not talking just about the United States, but I'm talking the world over. And then they would parade armory, trucks coming, and soldiers carrying guns. What's this trying to imply? Is this national holiday not supposed to be preaching peace? And talk of Independence Day. Is it not supposed to be talking of how we gained the independence, not through the what we fought, but what we should be looking forward to? Peace in every community, growth in our industries, in growth in agriculture, growth in every area that is going to promote peace in the coming days. What's this? What's all this display of how we can fight you, the mass destruction equipment that we have? What's all this?
Yeah, I think you're touching on something that's very much in the public today, more than ever. I think that, honestly, I think that whenever people rise up or when they begin to make progress, whether they're a minority or whatever, there are factions of people in this country and in other countries that think they are losing something because others are gaining.
Mm-hmm.
The analogy like it's pie, it's a piece of pie.
Yeah.
And what you're talking about and what I believe is that the more we empower, we all get richer. That's when this country operates at its best. When we look at our border right now, and some people are looking at it like, oh, this is a bad problem. How many Einsteins and Abraham Lincolns are at the border right now?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. People that could come in and lead this country and, and enjoy the freedom, the good part of what America is all about. I
Yeah.
think that, I think your question is so on point. But I think it takes leadership, to be able to understand that and to be able to understand that Yes, America did have their independence. Yes, they did have to go through conflict in order to get freedom from Great Britain and all. Was it perfect? No. Okay. There were a lot of other reasons. Okay. You
Mm-hmm.
know, um, even the Second Amendment, okay, that we have. Everybody's crazy about the Second Amendment, Well, that was
Mm-hmm.
added in the Constitution as an amendment, okay? And that was put in because Virginia was afraid that their slaves were going to rise up.
Yeah.
So they wanted that Second Amendment right put into the Constitution to raise a militia. But people don't want to talk about that. They want to talk about, it's my constitutional right. So we're not a perfect country by any means.
Mm,
People like you, and hopefully people like myself, need to bring this debate out in the open to
sure.
change people's hearts.
Yeah, exactly. And people who are also listening, we would like you to take charge of every area that you are in by rising up and saying, we need a change. And the small voice that you give out there could be the big
Yes.
change that is coming tomorrow. At this point, I want to thank each and every person who's been here with us and those who get to listen after we are through. Let me read a comment from John Kafuenyaga. He says, congratulations, Ed Cronin. Without empowering people, there is no way you will control crime.
Thank you, John.
Intelligent.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, John. Thank you.
Yes.
Yes, and we really appreciate you. And you've also written a book, and maybe someone can go and get to read it. And what's the title of the book? Where can people find it?
The book is called Just Policing: My Journey to Police Reform. And it's available on my website, www.justpolicing.org. Yes.
Wonderful.
And
Mhm.
it's so funny that you mentioned about this war thing because I'm working on a second book, and it's called Just War. Okay.
Mm. Mhm.
And the pain that it causes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So
Uh-huh.
I understand.
Yes, in one of the chapters include that aspect that we should stop displaying whatever it is that we have to destroy other people and start thinking of what we're going to display that is going to build other people up.
I can tell you one little thing I find very annoying is seeing all these big pickup trucks with flags on them, people driving around with them,
Hmm.
Uh, it reminds me of ISIS or the Taliban or something,
Yeah.
like you have to profess this stuff, and it cheapens. My father was a veteran of war and he was tortured. He was a prisoner. He went through all kinds of very bad things. And when I see people cheapen the flag that way, it's not, it's trying to glorify something. It's
Hmm.
not that. But I understand what you're saying, Anthony. Thank you.
Mm. And thank you too for taking your time to be with us here. We really appreciate. And yeah, we're almost coming to the end of this episode. And we'd like to remind all those who are watching and those who get to watch or listen on the platforms that we upload this program to go and reach out to Ed at www.justpolicing.org. Get the book, get to interact with him, and let's see how far this seed is going to grow and the fruit that we are going to harvest from just voicing out this these issues. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anthony. You have a
Yeah,
great day.
but before we go, would like you to leave us with a few words that we will always remember. We do that here. So this is your time, Ed.
Um, be humble and listen. The Greeks have a word. It's called metanoia. And metanoia means change of heart. And the only way I could change my heart is I have to listen. and to take it in and to reflect. And many times when I first hear something, I don't understand what it is. I think I do, but I need to walk away and I need to think more and more and more and put myself in someone else's shoes. So be humble.
Thank you very much, Ed. We really appreciate. And to
Thank
you
you.
who's listening or watching, remember to be humble. So says
Okay.
Ed Cronin.
Thank you.
That's all for now. And I've been your host, Anthony Morore. Together with Ed Cronin, we are saying bye for now.
Goodbye.
Bye.